forum, we'll just ask, are there any apologies? Do we have one lateness for Councillor Percival? Moved. Moved. Councillor Holding. Councillor Tevendale. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, none. So that's fine. So we'll get on to public forum now, and just welcome along Paul Rowan, Jane Smith, and Murray Simpson, who are all speaking separately, but all on the same subject. So just take turns. So we'd like to start. Murray. Right.
Mr. Kircher and councillors, thanks for allowing us to speak this morning, if only for 5 minutes. I brought on, this is a map which you might like to look at of our own property, and it has, I'm going to speak this morning on Fairview. I'll leave that on the side of the other guys. This map shows all the water, springs, soil types, something that's not shown in anywhere on the Fairview side. I also have some photos you might like to pass around of they're pretty well self-explanatory what's on them. But okay, so I'm a 4th generation Simpson in North Otago, but pretty strong ties with North Otago. I have a grandson here, born here, and he's the 6th generation. So the district is really important to me. We're also here as a group to show support for Gary and his report on carbon forests, which I will wholeheartedly support him on that one with 100%. And I'm sure the wider community support him also. We'd like to, I'm here to express my concerns over the Fairview forest and what's occurred there. Part of that place should be put in trees and part of it should not. There was a non-notified consent given to that property, to the carbon forest guys to plant it in trees. There were conditions in the consent that were not adhered to. There were, but because it was a non-notified consent, it's considered to be of low impact. But my concerns are that we now have a creek that's drying up. We have wild animals on our property. We've had to alter our farming practice next to it. It's affecting our community. There are also, it was a ground where the Maori used to travel through to central Otago. That ridge that divides the Kakanui catchment from the Waitaki catchment was a route they used to travel. There are actually Maori ovens up the back of that, which I fear now could be under plantation. But so the place had quite a significance, and for me to have a non-notified consent to allow that to put into trees was a huge area. Now there were 2 consents issued, conditional consents, and they have not been adhered to. So my question today is to the planning department, and I want to know what their intentions are with regards to the cutback on the waterways that have been planted right through, and the boundary fences that are in place have been planted right to the boundary. The plantation's been in for 7 years, and nothing. We had never met the guys that were from the carbon farming. We'd never met them until after the Livingston fire. Turned up home and told them what their forestry. But anyway, I guess the concern is what down the track. I believe there is an avenue for the council to tidy up part of that issue in the waterways, and to what extent they are going to follow that up. There are a lot of springs in that country and a lot of wet areas, not just the running water, but the wetland areas as well. That makes it very easy for the trees to soak up and slow flow down in a creek. And the opportunity could be to take to retrieve back some of those wetland areas as well. there's other conditions in there that haven't been followed up with regards to 2 areas that were left as in their natural state, or they've been slowly filling up with gorse, and there would have been reports written on those each year, and I'm pretty sure that that will not have been done. These guys are actually not good neighbours, and that's my 5 minutes going. If pretty well, that's my angle really. I'm pretty disappointed in these carbon guys, and if you read that article that Sally has put in the paper, you'll see that in the carbon farming's reply to the questions that were asked to them, they're virtually laughable. They're saying that in 30 years that place will start reverting back to native. Well, that's nothing more than a joke. And anybody who has not been out to have a look at that plantation should come out and have a look and see for yourself firsthand what they've actually done and what it's actually doing for the country. So anyway, guys, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. And I presume that we will, if I don't expect today, but we will hear back regarding what the council's prepared to do in those waterways to retrieve some of that land that's been put.
Yeah, we'll try and give some response today, but staff are still working through some of the options as well. So we'll come to that shortly. But Jane.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our very concerned community. My name is Jane Smith and I'm a sheep and beef farmer farming alongside the Mole Creek tributary and the Kakanui River. I come here today wearing hats of many representative groups throughout the Waitaki district. Never before has there been such a threat to the ecology, the biodiversity, the water quality and quantity of a river in the Waitaki district as right at this pivotal moment. In your hands, folks, lies the opportunity to either be at the forefront of a visionary policy or at the peril of temporary market forces that will have a permanent effect on our landscape, on our environment, our economy, and the social fabric of the Waitaki district, as you have heard from your very own mayor. I would like to frame the following areas of concern to your council. In doing so, I will utilise the example of the Hazeldean property and also consider the benefit of hindsight of such mass land use change that my fellow speaker, Mr. Simpson, has just outlined. However, I will point out that we as a community need to focus on the big picture due to the precedent that the aforementioned land use change may set in motion, and both the size of the prize if we get this right and the depth of the risk if we don't. The locality of this afforestation proposal is the number one concern. A forest of this size and the headwaters of a significant and ecologically unique river will indeed cause major downstream issues for all. As mentioned, this is an ecologically sensitive catchment and made so even more so because of the low quantity of water within the catchment due to the size, the nature, the topography, and of course, historical low rainfall patterns, leaving it particularly vulnerable and sensitive to changes in land use and management. I refer you to the DOC-authored study dated 8th February 2021, where current farming practices on this property were noted by the ecologists to have, and I quote, no adverse effects on the ecology, the biodiversity, or the balance of both in the river headwaters. This ecology and biodiversity are not only at risk throughout the lifetime of afforestation, but from day one, when mass vegetation clearance with chemicals such as Valguard or Valpor take place, killing any life within any waterway that it makes contact with. It has been noted that the danger in increased pest infestation that will cause on the ecology of the river, as the forest takes over the landscape, so too do pests, poachers, and diseases like TB. This is an internationally recognised biodiverse river with a unique fish species that you will be aware of, the lowland long-jawed galaxid, further downstream, that is highly sensitive and more endangered than the kakapo bird. Hence the rationale for this particular river to be very closely monitored by DOC. This catchment, as mentioned by Mr. Simpson, and specifically this river, is a traditional food gathering pathway for local iwi, and this has been reflected in its status as a statutory acknowledgement area. Other significant history on this particular property includes the stone yards, the huts and the middens, which are registered historic icons with dock and lie close to the dock administered marginal strip that lies along both the north and south branches of this river. The altitude of this locality makes it a very poor choice for a forest. In fact, this is a locality that a genuine forestry expert would not even consider. Due to the high winds and snowfall loading, the trees become deformed at an early age and break off branches as they grow. Hence, despite the intention of carbon farming to never harvest these trees, they will in fact begin to degrade as early as 15 years of age and start to clog waterways and affect water quality and quantity. The yield of water quantity downstream of such a site has been modelled as a decrease of between 30 and 80%. This would not only have crucifying effects on the native fish, water utilisation for irrigation, recreation and community enjoyment, but would spell an end to the renowned Kakanui estuary as we know it. All that we ask of Council is to ensure that the hoops that are put in place for land use change are the same hoops for all, regardless of the proposed end user. We ask Council to utilise the tools they have at hand already, such as strict governing of resource consents for mass vegetation clearance, particularly Indigenous vegetation, and going forward be at the forefront of shaping the tools they require in both their own Waitaki District Council plan and the Otago Regional Policy Statement. This can be done to discourage mass land use change and encourage small parcels of plantings within a number of farms to meet plantation requirements going forward, such as 10 hectares at a time. Can I refer you to two pieces of regulation? So reference 1, ECANS 5.189 regarding flow sensitive catchments, and even closer to home, the Waitaki District Council's hill and high country zone conditions. These are two examples of really good policy made to protect the high country and related sensitive areas from mass land use change. They're a really good template that is already there. Can I remind Council of the well-known quote, the higher up the headwaters, the higher the risk. Can I also recount the timeless ratepayer endorsed message that a wise decision around the table now takes less time and less heartache than 1,000 retrospective regrets in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Some very true words there. Appreciate that. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Paul Ruddenklaw and my property boundary is Hazeldean. If it is allowed to be planted out in pine trees for a carbon forest, it will have a significant impact on my ability to farm and my neighbouring farms also. This proposed forest will become a source of large numbers of wild pests, deer, pigs, possums and wallabies. These animals will have to move out of the pine trees to feed as nothing grows under them once the canopy is formed. Pigs like to eat newborn lambs and also mismother ewes and lambs when roaming through paddocks. This will lower my lambing percentage significantly. They also dig up pasture looking for grubs which will need to be replaced. Wild deer will come onto my paddocks, especially young grass and winter feed crops, making it difficult to establish them. They will run through electric brake fences, short them out, which in turn shorts out all fences running on that unit, making strip grazing in winter almost impossible. I farm 800 deer on my property as well as sheep and cattle. Wild stags will attack my deer fences and open them up with their antlers, potentially letting out my deer or killing perhaps expensive, well-bred sire stags whose antlers have been removed. Stags can also easily jump deer fences at times, and wild stags mating with my domestics will have a generational effect on my deer herd. It is unrealistic to deer fence the whole boundary due to the topography of the gorge, and as the deer and pigs can simply walk backwards and forwards across the river. Forest will be an enormous habitat for possums, stoats and ferrets, which are under control at this moment as we've been in a TB buffer zone control program. Due to this, I've seen the native vegetation on my farm regenerate tremendously. I now see tules and kareru, which I've never seen before on my farm in the previous 50 years. All native bird life is improving, but that will change rapidly with the habitat of this forest, which will allow these pests to eat the eggs and the birds and destroy the native vegetation. My property was part of the Waitaki District Council's Ecological Site Survey, titled Ruddencourt Property Site 78, prepared by Richard Ewens in February 2015. It would be beneficial if the councillors could please read this report, as Hazeldean river faces are the same as mine, but on a much larger scale. It states the number of indigenous plant species at present as 62, exotic plant species as present 11, making the percentage of indigenous plant species 85%. It also states, I quote, "This large site supports a relatively extensive area of remnant and regenerating broadleaf forest, with some remnant podocarps. The site also supports indigenous shrubland. The site lies within an at-risk environment and supports 4 at-risk plant species and 1 threatened bird species. The site also links to other significant sites and supports natural river functioning. The Kakanui River is one of the few remaining sites for the nationally critical lowland long-jaw galaxis, the rarest native fish in New Zealand." Unquote. I urge the council to turn down any application to clear indigenous vegetation from this Hazeldean property. Planting Hazeldean and trees will also have a detrimental social impact on the community, as it presently employs 2 staff plus casuals and all the rural support industries, for example, shearers, transport companies, and indirectly freezing workers, etc. Hazeldean as an operational farm puts hundreds of thousands of dollars into the North Otago community every year, and that will all be lost. I invite councillors out to my property where you can see the Kakanui Gorge and River, and also look into a large part of Hazeldean. I'm sure then you will agree that to plant this property into a large monocultured pine forest would be an ecological disaster, as it would destroy the biodiversity of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Right, councillors, you've been quite a bit there. I'll just get Mr. Power just to respond, or Mr. Cook, if necessary, to some of the questions that have been raised or comments that have been made, and then further questions after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Officers have been looking at this question for some time. Over the last 2 years, Council has increased its capacity in relation to environmental monitoring, consent compliance activities, and for that reason, relative to the previous 2 decades, there's been quite a significant increase in the frequency with which Council is taking enforcement action in relation to native vegetation clearance, which is undertaken illegally, leading to various forms of enforcement outcome, including a potential jury trial, which is currently under consideration. In relation to the establishment of carbon forests, it is a complex issue. It's one which affects all of New Zealand, and certainly an area that Council does have an interest in having an advocacy role in relation to review of the National Environmental Standard on plantation forestry. That standard is relatively permissive. Having said that, there are provisions within the regulations attached to that standard, which was established by central government, which do permit district plan provisions to take precedence, and for those district plan provisions to be stronger than some of the provisions within the regulations. We currently operate under the provisions of our current district plan, and it would be fair to say that Waitaki District's operative district plan at the moment is not strong in relation to the kinds of protections that you're talking about. It's something that we do need to look at and are looking at in relation to district plan review. So where does that leave us at the moment? It really leaves us potentially facing instances where carbon forestry companies could if they operated entirely within the provisions of the current district plan, establish forestry without need for a consent at all, if they were to go about it in that manner. Notwithstanding that, though, we would certainly be paying very close attention to the potential for destruction of native vegetation, and we have been in discussion with Department of Conservation about some of our concerns over the last several weeks in relation to some of these proposed carbon plantations throughout the district. It is a very serious issue, as you say, and it's one that probably in some respects is an unintended consequence of two things. One is government's Billion Trees program, the increased emphasis on carbon sequestration using forests, and the unusual circumstance where the Overseas Investment Office can permit foreign investment into carbon plantations, whereas foreign investment into agricultural land currently is not permitted. So all of these things acting in concert make it quite a complicated area to manage, but one that we are certainly paying very close attention to. Roger might have something to add.
Just ask Mr. Cook, who's acting group manager for the Heritage Environment Regulatory Group. Do you have any further comments to add?
Thank you, Kosha. Thank you very much, visitors this morning to come and do their presentation. I think really just reinforced to myself and with me the importance that we get this right and we use the tools and mechanisms that we have currently available to us. And I think CEO and Mr. Power has summed up the current situation extremely well.
Councillor Tavendale.
This is probably to Mr. Powell or Dr. Cook, but if the councillors were of mind to look at a planned change rather than having any changes made through the full district plan review, what kind of timeframes could you be looking at for that? And is that something that's going to be a viable option for us?
That's certainly something that could be considered. We'd need to report back to you on the sorts of time that might be involved with that. I couldn't give you an answer off the cuff.
Councillor McBroke.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for our CEO. Given that this was a non-notified consent, which complies with the district plan as we have at the moment, therefore, given a comment that was made before by Murray that the conditions on the consent were not met or appear to have not been met, what would council be able to do to ensure that those conditions were met, apart from the increased enforcement which you mentioned earlier?
In light of the fact that we are currently looking at this issue in relation to enforcement, I prefer not to speak publicly on that, but I'd be happy to brief council as that.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wolfson.
Yeah, thank you, team, for your very interesting and informative comments. Just going back to this Jane, which is the ECAN, is the farm area, is it under ORC or ECAN area?
So it's ORC, it is ORC.
ORC,
It's just, it's not far away from the boundary, but it's ORC. It's very much an example of the template that could be used. And my apologies, the two stages in the agree, but of particular interest was the Waitaki District Council.
Yeah. But even though in the ECAN one, to me, would rule out, it wouldn't fit the certain criteria. So,
Yes.
but thanks, that's very interesting to know these are out.
Oh, yes, look, Jane, I just want to thank you. The points that you make about the water plans, etc., for regional councils, they are also very important. So, district councils do not manage water other than potable water supply. And of course, we don't manage weeds and pests, which are regional council. However, we don't act in isolation. So local authorities and central government at all the tiers of governance can come together and act in concert in a coordinated way when the need arises. So we are certainly talking with with the regional councils and with the Department of Conservation about all of those mechanisms and tools which can be brought to bear.
Councillor King.
Yeah, look, thanks very much for coming along. It's something that's really topical out in the district just now. So good on you for coming forward. I mean, we're looking at our district plan just now, but I kind of feel we're tippy-toeing around the edges when we've got a really important issue that we're actually not, it almost seems not able to address. I've got some further comments to make. I'll make them in the reviews. But thanks very much for coming.
Councillor McGrovey again.
James, I just want to get a copy of your
Yes, yes. You could just email it to me, that would be good, Jane, thank you.
Anything else, councillors? No, I just want to reiterate the thanks to you for coming along. It very much is appreciated. We know this is a topic which is dear to your hearts because of the effects on you and your community. You know, it is something where we do have to act as strongly as we can. I don't think any of us don't like trees or the area, but they need to be in the right place, and that's the challenge in this circumstance. You know, I know the good work that NOSLAM are doing and acknowledge your co-leadership of that, Jane, and you know, a whole lot of good work going on in the Kakanui catchment to improve the waterway, improve the ecology there, and you know, these activities are putting all of that good work at risk. So you know, we want to be supporting our farming community, we want to be supporting our environment, and this is something that we have to do. So thank you again for coming and for again shining the light on this particular issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just one final thing, that they're contemplating having a public meeting, so whether you might like to discuss that amongst yourselves, whether it's in combination with the council or whether we do that on our own. We're also tomorrow flying and taking photos of the whole property. Now they could be available also to the council.
Yeah, no, that would be good, Murray. I'm certainly keen to you know, do as much as we can around the community information, and you know, a meeting is a good way to do that. I'd be keen to get MPI there, which I believe they are the ones responsible for the legislation around the national standards for forestry. They need to understand actually what the real implications of their policy is, and you know, how it's affecting local communities and actually negatively affecting the environment. So yeah, definitely keen to be involved. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, councillors, moving to agenda item 4.1. Get through these minutes and then on to the mayor's report. So minutes from the council meeting from 27th of October. It seems like a while ago. This one got missed in the system, so I just got these ones for approval.
Happy to move those. I did a couple of very minor typos.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins, Councillor McGrovey. Any other comments? Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And someone can move the adoption of the minutes from the 15th of December. Councillor Tavendale, Councillor Percival, thank you. Any comments?
It's all right that I've moved it. I was there via Zoom.
Sorry?
Pardon?
I was there via Zoom, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still under related emergency legislation.
Perfect.
Right. Okay, nothing. I'll put it to those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. So moving on to my mayor's report, item 5.1. So fairly brief report. Didn't have a lot of time to write much, and what I did write was really looking at the welcome we had to the new year, really, with the flooding event, and just acknowledging the really good work that our contractors and staff did, coming back in many cases from leave to deal with that emergency. So that was very much appreciated, and just really appreciated the I think we all appreciated the daily updates from the roading manager as to the status of roads. And, you know, I think that was very helpful as well for us to all understand what the situation was amongst our very wide district. So there's that. We'll go to the third item, which is the 2-year program that we're again taking part in. We didn't do it last year. We didn't have a young person, so very pleased to work with the Runanga to identify a young person with Sophia Hunter. So she'll be in that role. Still haven't quite talked to Councillor Tavendale about being involved in this one, but I believe she's quite happy to help with the mentoring, and that's something that we'll do throughout the year. But it's certainly a good opportunity for young people, and I'm sure that Sophia will get a lot of benefit from it. Topic of the day and of the month, really, possibly the year, aside from COVID, is the forestry issue around carbon credits. I'll take the report as read, but this is something where we really had to stand up for our community and say that this has to be done right. If we're going to be planting a lot of trees, it has to be in the right place, and it has to be looked after. It can't be just planted and left, and the community having to pick up the pieces and deal with the pests and deal with the environmental damage that such planting does. So, yeah, it's the ball is in our court, and we need to do what we can. Right, taking questions or comments. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Mayor, I share your views, and I notice at the end of your report, you say the time to act is now, and our community needs us to do just that. I think you're right, and I also think the Deputy Mayor's question about possible plan change points us in the direction of something we could do, because even if we, I do have a resolution, I'll test the meeting if you would allow me to soon, but even if we started work immediately on how we might manage these, the effects, and I'll be deliberately neutral here, even if we prepared some rules and policies and objectives regarding the effects of production and carbon forestry plantings in the district, that if we did that began that immediately, it would send a signal for a property that hasn't yet been unconditionally sold with purchases thereof. And B, it could either be the basis of a plan change or be incorporated in the district plan review as part of the new plan, whatever time frame works more effectively. So I would think a commitment to begin that process straight away would be a good way to do what you say, the time to act is now. Would you allow me to put a resolution or not?
Motion. Yep.
Yes, well, I would move council immediately, the council request that officers immediately commence the drafting of plan proposals to address the effects of production and carbon forestry plantings in the district.
Thank you. Let's move to Councillor Hopkins, second Councillor Tavendale. I'll just ask Mr. Cook whether he has any view on that, as far as or Mr. Power. Is there any sort of comment you want to make?
Well, a motion of this kind sets a clear policy direction. There would be a journey to travel, but it certainly does send a signal to the industry.
Okay, just speaking to that.
Yeah, just speaking to it. Yesterday we went through the draft or the district plan and where we're at with things. And by the time we go through draft stage and proposed stage and get an operative plan, we're looking at probably around 2024. And so this is not going to move fast enough for us to actually be able to react to these kind of issues at all. And we've had something really true raised by the community. I'm not entirely sure how much work goes into a plan change like this. So I want a bit more guidance in that respect. But I do think that this also gives our mayor some more tools as well in his tool belt, because I think reading his report, he certainly supports what's being said today, but he probably doesn't have a lot of tools that he can work with right now to address that. So anything that we can do to help and show that we wholeheartedly support, I think has got to be a really good move forward.
Yeah, that is the challenge, is what tools do we have? We really have to get new tools and to get some pretty sharp ones as quickly as we can. And I think it's a multi-pronged approach. It is doing what we can on a local basis to manage the effects, and it's also about lobbying at a national level to make sure that things are dealt with there. We are not the only council facing these issues. It has been an issue in Hawke's Bay for over a year. I didn't realise we had it on our doorstep with the forest that is there that was, ended up being on fire at Livingston. But we are getting this problem definitely in our neighbourhood, and it's only getting bigger. So the more tools we've got, the better. Just ask Mr. Power to comment.
The reason why I made reference to the National Environmental Standard for plantation forestry, following on from the Deputy Mayor's comments in relation to how rapidly things can be implemented, is that the National Environmental Standard is supported by regulations, and regulations can be changed very rapidly should a minister choose to do so simply by gazette. So one way of focusing attention on this in terms of speed would be to speak with relevant ministers and to persuade them that some perverse outcomes are potentially going to happen unless urgent action is taken. And the National Environmental Standard is up for, or very close to being up for, review. So that probably fits with the parliamentary process as well from that perspective.
Okay. Before I come back to you, Councillor Hopkins, I'll just say Councillor King and Councillor Wallstein.
Well, firstly, thank you for highlighting this in your report. Speaking to the motion, I certainly support the direction we're going in. And why not Waitaki's leading the way in this? And firstly, we must look after our own district regardless of what the national policy is. And I mean, as a farmer, I just can't figure this out. That you can plant a crop, do absolutely nothing, and make money out of it. I had to work really hard to keep my farm at one stage. And here we have farmers now able to plant pine trees. It's like farming fairies. I just don't understand. So, but that's by the by, because later on it's got to be tidied up. And who does that?
Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Churchill. Yeah, and like my fellow councillors, I support the resolution as well. So I see this as a very negative trend for Waitaki district, and because I understand it's a national directive to plant more trees, but I think to plant more trees, you've got to plant the right tree in the right place, not just as you say in your report, the carpet bomb landscapes and pine trees. So this is definitely the wrong type of farming for Waitaki district, and I think as our speakers told us today, the detrimental effect on the neighbouring farms will be huge. So I think we've got to try and convince the MPI of national benefits overridden by the severe negative local effects.
Councillor Williams.
I just want to speak fully in support of everything that's been said so far. but I just want to be sure, as long as our pushing forward with this resolution today doesn't take valuable time away from finding the actual best way forward, then yeah, just as long as we've got reassurance that that's the case, then I'm more than happy to keep moving in this direction.
Well, as I understand it, what's been asked of me today is to report back to you on the speed with which a plan change can be undertaken. But that's one tool amongst a number of tools that I'd like to report back to you on.
Okay, right reply.
Well, yes, if you like. Yes and no, Mr. Powell. I'm not asking you to report back. What I asked, the resolution says the council, we request officers to immediately commence drafting. So in other words, I've specifically not said we're going to go straight to a plan change, although I believe we can and should. And if I'm not mistaken, we could leave out the draft plan consultation stage and go straight to a proposal, which might mean, I would have thought that there might be a time frame which would allow us to have something in front of people for formal submission within 6 to 9 months, I would have thought, realistically. I see Hamish nodding. So that's a possibility. Once we've got the policies, objectives and rules in place that we want. So what I'm effectively saying is, in the first instance, let's get the template, and we can then say, right, we'll plug it into a plan change or plug it into the district plan review, whichever we think is going to get the best bang for the buck in the shortest possible time. So that's my intention, and that's why I worded the resolution the way I did.
Thank you. Last word, Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I just missed that before you started, but surely it's an issue to go through with the mayoral forum and be brought up like southern district mayors. I mean, I was down in Hindon recently, and over 10,000 hectares down there has been bought by outside interests for planting. And also in Gore, the same problem, and also it affects the Leading City Council. So surely to lobby successfully, you'd have to go through forums that we have available. And there must be attention made to it. Let's a group go to Wellington and lobby in the lobby. I mean, it's crazy, this whole thing. I mean, this presentation this morning, you know, it's just, we all know, but I mean, everyone wants to do something, but no one's actually doing anything.
No, I totally agree. It is about utilising the groups that we're part of. So whether it's Otago Mural Forum, Canterbury Mural Forum, rural and provincial sector, we have plenty of friends on this one, and you know, I think it is one of those calls to arms that the whole local government sector will listen to and are looking for an opportunity to act on. So, yeah, take your words on board and totally agree with them. I'm going to put the motion that we have in front of us. You read that out again.
That the council requests that officers immediately commence the drafting of plan proposals to address the effects of production in carbon forestry plantings in the district. Moved to Councillor Hopkins, seconded Deputy Mayor Tannenbaugh.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to put that now. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins.
Do we need any resolutions regarding mayoral forums and so on?
No.
No.
That will happen. Right. Any other comments? Councillor Tannenbaugh.
Just on the flooding events in January, I think we all know it, but just it really re-emphasises the need for the Kakanoi Bridge to be up to spec, for it to be closed as long as it was when you've got the main road closed as well. Has some major implications for our district. And so just, I know our team are always working on that anyway, it's not anything new, but we need to keep pushing NZTA for a solution.
Yeah, and just to be clear there, I mean, we want to get on with it. We are waiting for NZTA and Waitaki to move it up the ranks. Certainly encourage our representative on the regional Land Transport Forum, Councillor Percival, to keep pushing to have the Kakanui Bridge at the top of the list. You know, these ongoing closures could be easily done away with if we can get that new bridge in there. And, you know, we really want that to happen. So, yeah, it's just a matter of convincing the powers that be that we need that co-funding. Our money's there sitting waiting to be used, and we need that co-funding to make it happen. Thank you.
Just Deputy Mayor's comments and just a time to acknowledge our staff, their holidays cut short and the communications we get from the team that are involved in recovery.
That was great.
That's good. Okay, well, so I'd like to receive my reports. Councillor Gravy. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much for that. Now moving on to 5.2, the Chief Executive's report on page 30. To you, Mr. Powell.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report as read and answer any questions that elected members might have.
Okay, Councillor Gravy.
I have questions relating to the Chief Executive's comments regarding new local government network, local information and local government information points there. I've read the executive summaries of all of them. I wonder if you could give us another executive summary of what you're trying to say here. You're already saying that in the UK, because these reports are pretty much, I think, all from the UK, are you suggesting that the localism is different to what it appears our localism is going to be over here in the future, or what are you actually trying to say by these 4 reports?
The COVID-19 pandemic has really produced an opportunity for local government around the world to demonstrate its usefulness and how having local government services delivered most closely to the communities affected is more effective than more distant government. So there are multiple examples in those reports of how during the UK pandemic experience, local government has reacted and dealt with the issue, and how opportunities have arisen. And in New Zealand, it would be fair to say that local government has responded extraordinarily well. So we are lucky as a nation to have COVID-19 so well under control. But in those initial weeks of the impact of COVID-19 in New Zealand, local government really stepped up and were able to help their communities very effectively. And that points to potential advantages for increased diversification of the way that services are provided to the community through local government. And it's part of, I think, Minister Nanaia Mahuta's thoughts in relation to extraction of water activity from local government, but that being replaced by other responsibilities. So they're very interesting think pieces to go through and see if there are some learnings from the UK for us also.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I've got a comment and a question. I take your point in the start of the report. You say local government in New Zealand is currently facing the largest change it has since the reforms of 1989. And then you talk about, or imply, the reference to localism clearly, to my mind, indicates that you like that idea. The difficulty I have is that I think some of the signs that Parliament is willing to listen to what localists are arguing are not encouraging. I just note you refer to the local electoral Maori wards and Maori constituencies amendment bill, and I don't want to debate the merits of that, but I do want to put on record I think it was disgraceful for Parliament to only allow 1 day for submissions. 1 day on a matter where an electoral right conferred by Parliament, recently to 2002, is to be taken away. That doesn't, to me, augur well for genuine consultation and partnership. And I would like to see you and the Mayor stress to Stuart Crosby and others in local government New Zealand that they need to push back a bit harder and perhaps advocate for localism and true localism and variety of outcomes and management methods much more vigorously. The other question I have is just regarding the draft report of the Climate Change Commission. I see that the draft advice is now open for consultation until the 14th of March. Is it officers' intention at this stage, having looked at it, to either make a submission or join with others in a joint submission?
I've asked officers to provide advice to me in relation to what can be done in that regard and in relation to timing for interaction with elected members also. We do have very limited capacity in relation to this particular activity. Perhaps Mr. Hope might have something to.
I've got nothing at the moment.
In that regard. We do with our new waste officer, Steve, have an officer with a particular interest in this area, and we're exploring how his knowledge of this area might be able to assist as well. I suspect that through both Canterbury and Otago, the submissions of those regions, along with LGNZ, will probably suffice and may not require us to directly submit, but I'll be coming back to you on that.
Thank you.
Councillor McRory, you
I
go.
just support Councillor Hopkins' comments, and I think in my mind, and I've said this a number of times before, we've really got to ensure we protect our local democracy. That's what we really have. All our constituents are relying on us and our council and other councils to protect them and allow us to have a say on their behalf and allow them to have a say. And I think we really have to be very, very careful that we absolutely do our utmost through local government New Zealand and anybody else to protect our localism that we all treasure. And if that gets taken away, there will be a huge outcry. So protecting localism, in my view, is the utmost importance to us as a local council.
Yeah, take those comments on board and we'll take them to our various forums in local government, including local government national council. I think in the case of the changes to the electorate act around the Maori wards, I support the legislation, but as with anything, it's a good idea. It's worth discussing that properly with the community and making sure that they have the opportunity to have say. That is the basis of democracy, and there was no need to have it changed in the way it was. So, yeah, allowing 1 day for submissions to be made was not a truly democratic process. But yeah, those other elements that come into there noted, and we'll take them up at local government New Zealand level. Thank you. Anyone else with any comments, questions? So I'd like to move then the receipt of the Chief Executive's report. Councillor Holding and Councillor Williams. Thank you. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that is carried. Thank you. Now we move on to recommendations from committees. First of all, recommendations from Waitaki Community Boards, item 6.1 on page 42.
I'm happy to move that in the absence of Mr. Mayor, in the absence of anyone else.
Okay, so it moves Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Williams. Any discussion? Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that is carried. Next page, recommendations from the Hauriri Community Board. Councillor McRory, move that. Seconded, Mayor Tavendale. Thank you. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
That is carried. And going to the recommendations from the Harbour Area Committee meeting held on the 9th of February, page 44. So I think fairly self-explanatory, that just going into that meeting which we held last week, just looking to progress the first lot of projects in the Harbour Master Plan, and these are within the annual plan or in accordance with the annual plan as well. What it's doing is allowing a process, framework to progress those projects. One which allows input from members of the Harbour Area Committee to, rather than elected members and community members not having much say in the projects themselves as they get developed. Some are fairly straightforward, such as maintenance of breakwater, maintenance of Holmes Walk. Others are of keener public interest, such as the development of the farmers market area and the car parking around that. My expectation is as we go through that process, those things with more public interest will be shared and other councillors given the opportunity along the way as well, because it is such an important place for so many people. That's certainly my intention of how it would operate, but happy to have any questions or take any recommendation, take any motion.
Well, on the basis of what you've just said, I'm happy to move 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I will speak to that later.
Councillor Hopkins, thank you. Do a seconder? That's Councillor Hallorangi. Okay.
Well, look, just speaking to it, my concern was that the possibility of other councils and the community being shut out or having a one-stage process only. But the idea that the committee does, if you like, the legwork, it finesses something, comes back, goes through the committee, perhaps to council, so the public can have a couple of looks at it, other councillors can engage and contribute as well. I'm absolutely comfortable with that. It's what I would have advocated. And those assurances, to me, are totally justify the resolutions.
That's good. Thank you. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I probably don't recall where the funding and the resourcing came for all these things. I do know that some of them I recollect being put through, but some I don't. So where is, and how do we access the costing of some of these delegated
There is a summary in last week's Harbour Area Committee agenda, so you can see that detail there, and then you have to cross-reference back into the annual plan for the current year that we adopted last year.
So it was budgeted work.
Yes. So, if there's any change to the amounts proposed, then that will need to come back to council. Just as breakwater issue has shown us very recently with the current additional work that's needing to be done. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll put it, that was 1 and 2. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. And then we have the third motion approving the set of projects listed for tranche 1 on the Harbour Plan and beyond. Councillor Turnbull, thank you. Councillor Holding, seconded that. Any comment? Scratching his nose.
Sorry.
Okay.
What does body language say?
I shall put that. Those in favour of number 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Very much. Moving on to 6.4, recommendations from the Assets Committee held last week.
Now, hang on, you haven't moved resolution 4, or you need to do that?
Oh, sorry. I was moving past. Okay, so number 4 is just appointing particular members to each of the different projects. Councillor Grovey, thank you. Councillor Wallstein. Any discussion? Councillor Wallstein.
Just a comment, Mayor, as was said at the Harbour Committee meeting, that this just allows a small group of councillors and also external bodies to the committee to move on to consider these items and then to report back to the Harbour Committee through council. So it allows things to move on faster rather than being delayed. That's the reason for the appointments.
Okay, thank you. Comments? We'll put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That is carried. And now we'll move on to the Assets Committee recommendations around the breakwater etc. So got 6.4.1 resolution around funding and work to be done on breakwater. Councillor King, you'll move that. And seconded Councillor Williams, thank you. Yeah, I think we got to see a pretty good video of the damage that's needing to be repaired. The previous work is holding up well, and you know, there has been a bit of discussion as to tetrapods versus very large rock, and the reality is both work. The very large rock is holding well, and it's placed properly and locked together. Tetrapods also do work very well at dispelling some of the energy of waves, but they are also very, very expensive way to do things. So, yeah, that is one of the reasons why I've gone for rock rather than tetrapods. Anyway, any other comments, Councillor King?
Yeah, just, I mean, we can't do anything in the harbour unless we look after the breakwater. So I think it's imperative that, and I'm afraid it's going to always cost, but we've got to look after it.
Indeed. Okay, I'm going to put those in favour, say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. 6.4.2, the sand mattresses rock replacement. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you. Just have a couple of questions. And apologies, I was unable to attend the Assets Committee meeting. I'm not a member anyway, but if these matters were raised, then I apologise for the repetition. But a couple of questions to Mr. Hope, perhaps, or Mr. Power. The $85,000 loan, is that coming from our reserves or from the LGF? That's question one. And question two, I have a feeling that we have a 90%, 10% formula for loan repayments for work in the harbour, with 90% sitting with Oamaru water ratepayers and the rest 10% with the remainder of the district. How will the repayment of this loan be apportioned?
Through the near future, yeah, it comes from our reserves. Sorry, as we've covered before, essentially any internal loan comes from our reserves, and the LGF funding isn't attached to any particular project or item.
I see.
And the second one is, yeah, the servicing costs will be funded in accordance with all of the other costs in relation to the harbour, which from memory is about that 90-10 split.
And the terminal loan, 10 years?
I think it'll be significantly shorter than that, probably 5 would be the most we want to fund it over.
It's a relatively small amount, so funding over 5 makes sense. And you also tend to have the loans funded over a reasonable period of expectation of the life of work. We certainly hope it's going to be more than 5 years, but it's better to get it paid off. So if any more work is needed in 5 years' time, we don't have 2 loans. Okay, any other comments? Oh, sorry.
No, just to say, thank you, Mikuta, that the Sandhill mattresses was a well-researched method of trying to maintain the beach, but the contractors were undone by a huge storm at the time, which ruined the beach and ruined the work that had been started. So sadly, Mother Nature was the reason why the Sandhill mattresses did not succeed as.
I think that's sexist. It's that's just nature.
So from that point of view, I'm certainly fully in support of the putting the rock along. So
right. Okay, so gender wars aside,
Put
that motion. Those in favour say aye. Those against, it's carried. Yeah. I'm about to go. Okay, sorry, we didn't get a mover in a second. Councillor Wallstein was speaking to the motion.
Yes.
And seconded by Councillor Haley. Thank you very much. And we'll put that again. Those against, sorry. Those against, it's carried. Again. Apologies for that. Okay, now moving on to the OMR Park lease proposal on page 47. So we just going to have Mr. Hope speaking to that, and property manager Mrs. Julius here, and thank you. So welcome to the chamber, and get you to introduce the report.
Thank you. From my reading of this, and I'm relatively new to this issue in a formal way, this seems to be a relatively procedural item. It's been well discussed. There's been plenty of information supplied. It really is just a requirement for council to take a position, but without making a decision in terms of progressing the request from St John's to lease part of an OMR park to develop a fit for purpose base for their ambulance operations. Really just two people with far more knowledge of the situation to answer any questions. But questions get on.
Just ask, do you have any comments before we go to questions?
I think it's
Okay. Good to go. Councillor Taylor.
Just on the consultation documents, I know we probably have to do it some, certain ways, but I thought that some of the summary things, when we start to refer to the situation, the land situated in CTPTS 86, all that stuff, just makes it really hard to actually just read the actual main sentences of a lot of the stuff we're talking. So we've got that kind of right through, and whether we can do what we need to do legitimately, but actually just have some clearer, shorter, sharper sentences at the start, just to make it a little bit clearer what we're doing, because it's really quite technical speak in the way I read it.
Well, maybe we could just superscript those bits and pop them down in smaller print down the bottom for those people that are really interested.
Because I think it really makes it a little bit less approachable. And the other thing was just on the maps, which were great. One of them was named top with Waitaki Street, but just whether or not we can name a few things or something, just to give people a bit more of a bearing as to where exactly we're talking and things.
Okay. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I sort of confused with the wording. How can we agree in principle to this proposal when we don't have a mandate from community? It sort of seems back to front to me. You don't, to agree in principle is to give our agreement to put this forward with support. Well, I've got reading of principle wrong. The thing is, yeah, there's a lot of controversy about it, and there will be. I mean, it's up to me. In my opinion, it's up to the community to make the decision. And I don't like it. Sorry.
Well, I think it's pretty well established that council, whenever it's going out to consultation, actually needs to take a position and consult on that position rather than just sort of say, oh, well, here's something and we want your feedback on it. You need to do that with the long-term plan, the district plan, everything else. You need to take a position first, and then follow through the process of considering the feedback and take with an open mind, and then make a decision at the end of it. It's following pretty well established pattern requirements in terms of consultation under the OEM.
The key there is in principle, and what that is referring to is that we want to hear what the public has to say, and then we make a decision one way or the other. We are very able to make a decision that we won't proceed once we hear the feedback, just as we can also decide that we will proceed. So the in principle is that whole condition that we want to hear from the public, but the alternative, as Mr. Hope's pointed out, really is that any suggestion that comes to us, we can't have a position, we have to put it out to the public, whereas actually this has been through a number of filters already for us to get to this stage. And we think it's worth asking the public what they think, and then making the decision from there. So we really, I can't stress too much. We want to hear from as many people as possible who have an opinion as to what that opinion is and the reasoning behind it. Councillor McRoby.
Well, I think Councillor Percival has been reading my notes, or I've been reading his notes, because my question is exactly the same. Right, the other was around the wrong way.
Well, again, we have to decide whether we want to take it to the public or it's just a total waste of time. In this case, we felt we want to hear from the public. Councillor Williams.
Yes, I just want to emphasise that we really, every step that we pushed this through, it was that we felt that it was the greater community that needed to make a decision and not us, and why we're in the position that we are now. But I just want to make sure that we're very clear that at every single stage that we go to the public, we really get out there and make sure we want the public knows that we want to hear from them, because it is their decision. So that every message that we send out there makes it clear that we, even though we do have a stance, and our stance basically is that we want to hear from the public and we want the public to make a decision, as opposed to we support this idea. I think we need to be very clear that we support it going to the public for the public to make a decision, as opposed to we're saying we're all over this one. Okay, so I see where you're coming from, that we have to have a stance, but the stance is we want to hear from the public. It's their decision.
Councillor Hopkins.
I'm not really Councillor Wolsey person, I'm not sure.
No, you're.
Oh, okay. Look, I just wanted to say, first of all, I totally endorse the Deputy Mayor's comments regarding communications. The comms portfolio trio, Melanie, Gary and I were asked a comment from Victoria, and I did send her a comment basically saying I thought it was too long, too wordy, too obscure, and I begged her to just do something short and punchy that framed a very simple question: is this the right place to put St John's HQ? Because what do you think? And if we can couch it in those simple and clear and explicit terms, yes, I would be feel more comfortable. I, like others, I noticed, I felt the wording agrees in principle with resolution number 1. May suggest to the community that we have already made up our minds. And I think I take Paul's point that we have to take a position. I'm not sure that's the only position that we could take. And it may be that we can be a little bit more conditional in terms of recommendation number 1. I would just note, if you go back to the resolution that may have been 2 years ago now, that the resolution that was originally put was that we would actually engage with St John after an initial period of public consultation, which we asked them to undertake. And the resolution that's on record, and I voted for the resolution at that stage for this reason, said if there is no objection, we will engage with. And there was objection. So we're back to the process of a more formal consultation. And I think it would be preferable if we framed one in a way that indicated perhaps a greater degree of, I totally understand what the Mayor's saying, and I accept the word in that sense, but I'm not sure that a lay audience would see it in quite those terms. So I would probably argue for a slightly moderated wording.
Councillor Wolsey.
Yeah, I just echo the comments made by my fellow councillors, and when I read that as well, I thought, to me, the layperson reading that would read into that more than what council intended in terms of going out for public consultation, but I would almost read that as being councillors in support. And I think that Councillor Hopkins made the point that, very similar to my own, and I was going to actually just foreshadow a motion to change the wording there along the lines of, to number 1, that council agrees to consider making council land available. Not agrees in principle, but agrees to consider making council land available. So that's what we're doing. As the fellow councillors have said, we are putting that out for the public to give us their opinion, and council is not taking a position either for or against the proposal, but is taking a position to allow the public to give us their opinion. So I'd like to say foreshadow motion to change that initial wording.
Okay, note that, thank you. Councillor Hale-Laley.
I was almost going to say the exact same thing that Councillor Wolstenton said. When I first read that, it's quite leading in a way, and we don't want to give the wrong impression to the community that we actually have already agreed as a council to move forward with this. We talked about democracy earlier, and we need to give it due process. So I was just in agreement with the last three motions, but in terms of Councillor Wolsten's rewording of the first motion, I would quite accept that too.
Okay.
Yeah, well, in case I'm
So really, sorry, can you give the wording, please?
Oh, just to remove the words in principle, to make, and to replace those, consider making.
Council agrees.
The council agrees.
Consider making, yes.
Yeah, the council, one agrees to consider making, council and available. Yes.
Yep, okay, accepted that, and seconded by Councillor Hale-Laley. Yeah, okay. Moved, seconded, so speaking to the motion, Councillor Tappender.
I think we're all sitting around here with the same kind of thought. Like, this was clearly right from the start, it was St John's process, and we certainly supported talking to them and looking for options with them, and this is something that's been brought to us, and I think every one of us believes that it's the community that needs to drive this and St John that needs to drive this. It's not our process per se, even though we're running the consultation, because we've got to make sure we do it in a way that uses as many people as possible and actually reach as many people as we can. But yeah, totally support this. I think it's great to clarify that this is not us wanting to say we have this, you know, we want it or we don't want it. We want to say, tell us what you think, and we'll listen to what you think. So totally support.
Okay. Any other speakers?
Mayor, just a point of order, can we move the other motions at the same time, or are we just looking at one at the moment?
No, we'll, is the mover and seconder wanting to move them all?
Yes, I'm very happy to move them all. Good, if my seconder is prepared to do so.
Okay, thank you. So we have the motion as stated by Councillor Wolstein, as moved by Councillor Wolstein, the other three as motions. I'm just speaking to the motions overall. Yeah, this is a very good opportunity to ask our community what they want. I think St John have done a good job of letting people know and it's helped people make decisions one way or the other. And you know, that's certainly helpful from our perspective, to do that. At the end of the day, we have to make a decision and we need to own that decision. What we want to help us do that is as many submissions as possible from the university, and ideally not just yes or no. So what, you know, are there concerns? Are people just, you know, totally supportive, or are they, you know, what are their concerns, or are they just absolutely against it? So I'm keen to hear what they've got to say and weigh up those those submissions in due course. So this allows that process to happen, and staff got a wee bit of work to do ahead of them. But, you know, in a month's time, we'll get that feedback and see where we go from there. Okay, anyone else want to speak to the motion? She'll put it. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Oh, is it that time? We're on a roll.
I heard the ghost of Councillor Garvin coughing here this morning.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn now for morning tea, and we will be back with the live stream starting again at 10:55. Yeah, 10:55. Thank you very much, councillors and members of the public.
You are now live.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and we will now go to item 7.2 on page 64, talking about the Mackenzie and Waitaki District Council's integrated services. So we've had a workshop on this, so we have a bit of an understanding, but just to introduce the report, and it is the next process towards step in the process of formalising what we might do. We've got Mr. Cook as acting group manager for the Heritage Environment Regulatory Group. So, welcome, Roger, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike Kircher. As you correctly said, this was subject to a CCR workshop on the 1st of February, and many of you would have been at that workshop where the Mackenzie District Council members and officials, officers, and Waitaki District Council elected members and officers discussed the opportunity we have and the potential to reduce risk in Waitaki District Council from our sustainability and vulnerability of the regulatory services, the details of which are outlined in the paper. And I'm prepared to obviously take any questions.
First of all, questions. Just make comment too, and we are running behind time. Don't want us to curtail any debate we need to have, but just be mindful of that. But yeah, do we have any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yeah, thank you, Roger, for your paper. Just a quick question. It seems to me the major risk for this proposal is staffing. So is it the case where having a bigger unit here will enable more staff to be attracted because of the bigger, wider scope of work?
Thank you for your question. Yes, I believe that could be one of the benefits. It allows the greater staffing number you have. Firstly, you reduce your risk if you have a staff of 10 or 12 and you lose one. It's a lot smaller percentage than if you have a staff of 6 or 8. It also the more attractive proposition for people who are building their career in building control, and would allow potentially some areas of specialisation where people could do more technical stuff. So it would make us, I believe, a more attractive employment opportunity for building control officers.
Thank you.
No other questions? Would someone want to move? Councillor McGrovey, Councillor Wallstein, moved, seconded, that we approve the feasibility study through the development of for the development of a joint business case for an integrated regulatory services model between Mackenzie District Council and Waitaki District Council. Just very quickly on it, I think this will allow us to see whether it's going to be a win-win for both councils. I think that's what probably the thing I'll be looking at is that certainly our council gains from this relationship, and I'm pretty sure Mackenzie will see that as well. And it really very much is increasing the overall capacity and capability of both districts when it comes to regulatory services. So I think it shows good promise. The feasibility study will demonstrate whether that's the case or not. Do we have any other speakers to the motion? I should put it. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Now moving to 7.3, Waitaki District Health Services Limited 2019-2020 annual report. Don't have representatives from the company here with us. Been a bit of a miscommunication. I thought they were coming, but we will be hearing from them soon. And so we need to make sure that that's in public and people have the opportunity to hear how things are going. Generally speaking, my recent communications with this year have been quite positive, and I really do think that things are improving, and in a range of ways. And, I think that's credit to some of the changes in personnel that have happened in management at the hospital. As far as the financials go, though, I've seen Mr. Hope to just introduce the report.
Yeah, the report is, as elected members will probably be aware, not only includes the results of Waitaki District Health Services, but also the Observatory Retirement Village. So it is presented as a group report, including those two amounts. So it is clearly quite hard to see the contribution of either organisation into the overall result. To suggest sort of limits the usefulness of the report, but it does mean they do meet the reporting requirements, statutes and acts that they are required to comply with. Yeah, it's overall it's a reasonable financial performance. They get a clear audited. Like council, they got a 2-month extension to their reporting deadline last year. Time. And yeah, as to the other matter, yes, if we probably thought about it a bit more, we wouldn't have invited them to this meeting because they will appear in the very near future. The 2 month delay in receiving this, we're now getting very close to the time they will present their half-year result. We'll discuss the statement of intent, the draft statement of intent, and a few other matters. So I think that will be a more meaningful discussion. Happy to answer any questions about the report, but they are recorded and forwarded in a response from the company directly the next time we meet in terms of the result. So just to receive the report, pass the resolution in relation to the AGM. Only direct feedback report those and report those and discuss them next time. Otherwise, you could just forward those questions through to me, and I'll make sure that Chief Executive and Chief Financial Officer have those questions so they can investigate as required and be responsible.
So, councillors, just any questions to start with? Councillor Hopkins.
Well, just to clarify, I did have some questions about the finances because I think if you're, again, if a lay reader is looking at them, there are numbers that jump out and may arouse needless concern or may justify explanation and clarification. So picking up on your points and the mayor's, we will have a chance, will we, to actually ask the directors about specific figures. I mean, budgets for locums. There's a deficit signal on one of the pages. Questions like that can and will be able to be put.
Yes.
So and we can do those either through you or on another day in this place.
Well, I think if you can send them to me, but then you would have the opportunity to essentially ask those questions in person when they meet. It's just helpful if we give an indication of the likely areas of inquiry so that they can do any investigations into matters so they can present a full answer when they do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Tavendale.
I'm just happy to move the recommendations.
I think we're at question. Councillor Wallstein.
Yes, the question beforehand. We do. Thanks for Mel. Just going note 4, page 25 of there, page 95 of ours. Audit fees form. They pay audit fees to Audit New Zealand for the financial statements and also audit fees paid to Grant Thornton for the financial statements. So I assume in one case the Grant Thornton would be auditing the Observatory Village.
That's correct.
And then the obviously Audit New Zealand doing the final accounts. So therefore that would suggest there are 2 separate sets of accounts that are available. So I just signal that I think I would like to see those sets of accounts to be able to learn of the actual result of the hospital and the village before they are amalgamated into one final set of accounts presented to us here.
I think, yeah, certainly be useful to see group and parent separated, or they can be on the same page. Having them itemised between the two be more normal practice and will allow a bit greater transparency for us and for ratepayers. Yeah, it is one of the unintended consequences of the Audit General's ruling that they are linked entities is that we've lost transparency because of it. So, sometimes be careful what you push for. Councillor Tabendale.
You're happy to move the recommendations?
Happy to see from you, Richard.
To you both.
Just to speak to that, I totally agree. Transparency is what we've lost here. And these are now quite old. So looking forward to the 6 monthly, and I hope when we get the 6 monthly, it's going to not be the audit requirements, but our requirements to understand a bit more about what's happening within the hospital company. But yeah, other than that, I think at this stage, these are quite historic and we need to look forward and see what's actually happening.
Yeah, it's one of the major concerns of directors has been the increased cost of auditing. They are paying tens of thousands of dollars more than they used to. Money that would have gone on our health services is going on, obviously, the worthy occupation of accountants, but in this case, it's, well, they are a form of accountant. I won't say where they come as on the ladder of the species, but no, it is money lost to our community, unfortunately, and yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. But it's what we have to live with. So, Councillor McRory, you say as well.
If we look at the statement of intent objectives on our page 109, or the page 109, all but one objective has been met, and that's for both the hospital and the observatory village. And I think we mustn't lose sight of that, given the difficult times that it's been through. So if we look at the only one that's not been met is that financial one, we're probably well aware of that over the last year or so. But all the other ones have been met, and I think that's something that should be complimented. And I'm sure it'll improve as we get on through the years. But let's not lose sight of that statement of intent, which is our controlling document between us and our entities that we own. So that's quite an important document to understand.
There's one other, I think, education achieved either.
It too.
And
very good result.
Probably a wee bit of an update is that since this financial financial year being reported there, since that ended, they have been successful in recruiting rural specialists, so not using as many locums. They've also had very good discussions with the Southern DHB, and I believe there is around about $500,000 shortfall in the funding that they're getting. So if all of these things can be made to turn around, I think things will be looking much rosier, which we'll all be grateful for. So it's taken a long time, but I do believe we are getting there. I live optimistically, but I think we've got good people involved, and you know, they are working hard to get things running smooth. Councillor Halliday.
I was just going to say some of the comments to Councillor McRory just on page 109 in terms of the statement of intent targets. One of the targets is operate and provide planned services within budgeted income, including services contract income with Southern DHB. I know that there is additional funding that they can be applying for on behalf of our community, and I know that the new CEO will work hard towards accessing that funding. So I'll be fully supportive of that achievement that been achieved with the next report.
Thank you. Any other comments? Put the motion, we received that report. So those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Mr. Hope. Moving now to 7.4, District Plan Review, Draft Chapter Approval on page 122. And welcome back, Mr. Cook. Introduce.
Yes, thank you very much. This paper is to request approval for the release of the 3 draft district plan chapters: natural features, landscapes, ecosystems, indigenous biodiversity, natural hazards excluding new wildfire provisions. The purpose for us asking this is so we can commence some landowner engagement discussions. Many of you would have been at the various CCR workshops on the district plan recently and have an appreciation of the quantity of landowner engagement which the team now need to undertake. And it would be beneficial to be able to go out and discuss the impacts of these chapters with those landowners. Have senior planner Trina with us if you have any questions.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, look, I think the key thing here, in the end, sad as I am about the obscure and alienating nature of planning language, which I think is one reason why so many people don't engage. These are draft chapters and they can be refined, simplified, becoming a translation document. So I think we have to approve the drafts. What I do want to establish quite clearly now, but we need, I think, for both of us today, to seek approval for 3 draft district plan, the objective, to seek approval for 3 draft district plan chapters to be released for community feedback as part of the district plan review process. My view is that we need to know what that timetable is. In other words, I'm not comfortable with just saying, yep, okay, they can be released. I want us to say today when. Do Katrina and Roger, sorry, Mr. Cook, Katrina Clark, do you envisage the consultations begin before the draft plans or chapters are released? What is the time frame and timetable, please?
Thank you for your question. In terms of the timetable, these chapters will be subject to discussion through the landowner engagement process, from which we'll obviously receive feedback, and then depending on the level of feedback that we get, that will determine the stage between the finalisation of the landowner engagement and then the release of the draft plan, because we'll be then reporting back to the district plan review subcommittee on feedback from landowner engagement, where some issues may have arisen, that it may be decided that we actually do further work before the draft is actually released. So at this stage, we're just asking approval for the draft district plan chapters for those 3 sections to be released to allow us to proceed with landowner engagement, so that we have open and honest discussions.
Well, in that case, I'll foreshadow that I might move a slight amendment to the recommendation, but yeah. So when you consult with them, would you be trying the actual chapter at them or just simply giving them a précis of objectives, policies and rules?
We'll be looking to present a high-level précis.
Would you entertain a recommendation?
See if there's any other questions at the moment.
Well, I will move the council approve the following draft chapters for release initially to landowners during the engagement phase of the 3 chapters. Sorry, let me just move on this for a second. Approves the following draft chapters for release initially to landowners in the engagement phase of the following 3 chapters in the draft district plan, subject to the plan integration process, and then A, B, and C. So just speaking to that, well, a second.
We have a second. Tabitha?
Just, I mean, essentially, what I'm saying is, based on what Katrina has said, that we need to talk to the landowners when we engage with them about the chapters. And so let's do that. And then we can, at that point, even once we can get some sense of what they feel about it, we might actually even tweak the drafts before they go out to wider community consultation. But so that's why I suggested that slight modification to the recommendation.
I seconded that because I understand the intent. I just wonder whether it actually did make sense. Can I just have
If I can address that one part of it was repeated twice, so I do have a modified version that I can put back to you. approves for release initially to landowners in the engagement phase. The following.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, perfectly happy with that. Well done.
The
Thank you.
following 3 chapters in the draft district plan subject to plan integration process.
No, I'm totally happy with that. Thank you very much. If the
Yeah.
seconder is, yes.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. And just to speak to that, there's been a lot of work go on, and this just enables our staff to go out and actually tell the people that are going to be most affected by changes and things. Tell them what that means and start to get some feedback, and that's going to give us a lot more information and a lot more surety around the decisions that we have to make in the future. So a lot of work still to happen, but I really support what they've done now. Thank you.
Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, just a question, interpretation with Councillor Hopkins' resolution, because the decision objective does say to be released for community feedback. The contents of these chapters will be discussed with landowners, so it's covered in the, whereas the resolution that's now in draft, it says released to landowners.
Initially. Yeah.
So, but why not, does that actually remove the release to the wider community?
No.
One clarification. It did seem to me that the decision objective, that 3 lines there, did cover that point, but.
Mr. Cook.
We would appreciate if that could be clarified, because it would be very difficult for us and officers to protect it just to landowners. It would be going to community.
Councillor Williams.
I'm against change for the sake of change. I personally felt like the recommendation and decision objective together gave very exactly what the officers were after for this process. So I don't see a reason to change something unless it actually needs to be changed. So if there can be some clarification as to exactly why more is needed in the recommendation, that might help my understanding.
Ask you to respond to that, Councillor Hopkins.
Well, look, speaking to this matter, there was a workshop on precisely which came with precisely this issue yesterday. And at that workshop, officers advised us that the recommendation would be in public session at today's meeting, but that the chapters would remain in public excluded until we chose to bring them out. Now, that is not what is here. There's nothing that says that the following draft chapters will remain in public exclude, or there's nothing that actually enables us to manage or stage or phase the release of these chapters. So what I tried to do was simply to say, okay, if since we can't apparently do what we were told yesterday we could do, i.e. retain them in public excluded, that in the first instance we'd say that the people most directly affected, here's what we're looking at and this is what it would mean for you and your property, and get some feedback from them and then engage with the wider community. That was the rationale for what I did.
Mr. Cook.
I apologise for any misinterpretation of what I said yesterday. I was referring to the fact that the chapters are not attached to the paper today, and that if you decided not to approve it today, then the chapters remain publicly excluded. My concern around the point of difference over landowners and community is that if we held a public meeting or a federated farmers meeting, for example, we couldn't guarantee that everybody that meeting was actually a landowner of land that was counted by the plan.
Well, sorry, because again, the timetable yesterday was, first thing we do is engage with landowners, then we talk to the community. That was what you told us you wanted to do. And all I'm doing is enabling you to do that in the sequence you put to us yesterday as your preferred method of engagement. You talk to the most affected people first and then the wider community second. And I would place a great emphasis on initially. It doesn't limit your engagement, it simply means you talk to one group first.
Councillor Tavendale.
Just taking on board what Mr. Cook said and things, At this stage, I'd like to remove my seconding. I just feel that the way it's written, we might need to have them actually come back to us before they talk to us. And I take the point on stakeholders and things needing to be part of this conversation probably very early on in the piece. I don't want to hamstring staff. My intention is that these draft tractors are able to be released as the officers see fit to be working in the way they need to get the feedback we're looking for.
Okay, so we don't have a motion in front of us at the moment. Someone want to second what Councillor Hopkins moved? Does someone want to move something else? Councillor Tavendale.
I'll move the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you. Any comment?
Well, I'm not sure that we were advised. Well, sorry, I understand the possible misunderstanding that arose yesterday's workshop. I think it is very disappointing. I would hope that officers manage the release of these draft chapters in the best possible way to achieve our desired outcomes and prioritising those who most need to be engaged with first. I can't vote against it, but I'm disappointed that we're not being a little bit more measured and structured in terms of how we do this.
Do you believe it's differing from what's being described as?
Well, you could say subject to the plan integration process. That may mean that that could be a reference to the timetable proposed by officers. You could interpret those words in that way. And if officers do interpret those words in that way, I take great comfort from that interpretation.
Mr. Cook, to respond.
There's certainly officers' intention to engage with landowners as a matter of priority. As we have discussed in other forums, there is many landowners to engage with, and we respect your desire to maintain the chapters as contained as possible. And I apologise for any misleading communications that I may have given.
Okay. Councillor's clear on the situation. We're going to put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you both. Okay, councillors, that brings us to the end of the public part. We have some minutes and it's one item, other item in public excluded. So bring the live stream to an end. So thank you to all who have joined us on that. Now, it's time to move that we move to public excluded. Mr. Tavendale, thank you. And Councillor Holding, thank you very much. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried.